statisticians, the average person spends at least 1/5 of his or her life talking. In a single day, listen to this, in a single day, enough words are used to fill a 50-page book. In 1 year's time, the average person's words could fill 132 books, each containing 400 pages. Imagine that. That's a lot of talking. It is rare that I don't see somebody with this all the time, always talking. In fact, this past week I had to run to the pharmacy, and I turned into the parking lot, and it's kind of an odd way you have to turn and you turn again. And this woman, I couldn't get to a parking place. This woman was backing out, and she was talking on her phone, trying to back out, doing this. And she couldn't make the turn. 4 times she tried. And by the third time, I wanted to get out of the car and say, put down your phone. And you will have 2 hands to use the steering wheel so that you can get on with your day and I can get on with mine. Took her 4 times. You know, I've been with people that for several hours at a time, and the only word I ever said was hello. Have you ever been with people who just talk all the time? They just talk. I have one friend, she died a couple of years ago, and I loved her dearly. She is the only person in my life that would call me on the phone, and I would say hello, and she would begin the conversation with the word and. Have you ever had someone start a conversation with and? It's like we never finished the last conversation. I think she just kept on talking and forgot I wasn't on the phone, and it's and. We like to talk, don't we? The author of the book of James says that teachers must be very careful with their words. Now let me pause a minute. When you heard that, you probably thought, well, that exempts me. No. We all teach. All of us teach all of us. By our words and our actions. We all teach. Those who teach school and Sunday school have to be very careful. I had a Sunday school teacher when I was a youth minister. I went in his class shortly after becoming the youth minister, and he was telling his class the meaning of the gospel. And this is how he defined gospel. He said the gospel was the virgin birth and the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Now what's wrong with that? Is that the gospel? Go home over lunch today after you think about giving and talk about what does the word gospel mean? You see, what's wrong with that definition is because he left out the entire life of Jesus. There was nothing about his preaching, his teaching, his healing, miracles, anything. The word gospel itself means good news. Now, are we able to articulate to others by our words and our actions good news? What does the gospel mean to us? Now, this particular passage from the book of James deals with the tremendous power of the tongue. There is the tongue that's uncontrolled that can cause great damage. It can cause discouragement, defeat, and even death. I'm going to get to that in a minute. Or the controlled tongue by the Spirit of God that gives us life and meaning and joy. I think controlling our tongue is one of life's greatest challenges. Someone's observed that a dog has so many friends because he wags his tail more than his tongue. I like that. The author of the book of James has more to say about the tongue than any other book of the Bible. And if we summarize these verses that were read in your hearing, I believe we could summarize it by this. If a person can control their tongues, then they can master their life. We learn to control our tongues, we can master our life. You see, more damage is done in the world because of the tongue. Spouses have stabbed each other with words that are sharp as daggers. Parents have devastated their children by repeated blasts of venom. And children have exploded on their parents like a bomb going off, causing deep hurt. And churches have been wiped out by wagging tongues that have sliced, diced, and chopped people to shreds. Amazing what the tongue can do. In the first chapter of James, if you go back, you ought to go home and read the whole book. It's very short. You ought to read the whole book of James today. But in the first chapter, he says, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. And then the author, in these few verses, 12 verses, he uses 6 different images, 6 different word pictures to help us see how small the tongue is and yet how powerful it can be. He talks about it with the bit of a horse, a rudder on a ship, a fire, dangerous animals, a spring of water, and fruit. How many of y'all have ever tried to put a bit in a horse's mouth? Raise your hand. If you've ever tried to put a bit in a horse, do they want to take it? I used to own a horse. They don't like it, and they'll fight it. You have to hold their head and stick that thing in on the tongue. And once you get that bridle in and the bit in, you can control that massive animal just with his tongue. Mighty shipping vessels can turn on a dime because of one little thing called a rudder. It's amazing. A tiny little flame can wipe out cities and homes and kill people. Fire can be deadly. Dangerous animals can be controlled. Just go to the circus if you don't believe it. You'll see ferocious lions that jump through burning hoops, grizzly bears that can ride on the back of a horse, and elephants that can do handstands. But it's harder to control the tongue than dangerous animals. And then James draws our attention to a spring, and he asks, can fresh water and salt water come out of the same spring? It's impossible. Nowhere on earth do we know that happens. And what he's trying to say is, neither should our tongues be able to bless and to curse together. And then he uses the image of fruit. Can a fig tree bear olives or a grapevine bear figs? Nature reproduces after its kind. And he's calling us to be consistent in the way we use our tongues, because what comes out of our mouths is a reflection of what's in our hearts. Let that sink in a minute. What comes out of our mouths is a reflection of what's in our hearts. If you're angry, it's going to come out. If you're bitter, it's going to come out. If you're sad, it's going to come out. If you're happy, it's going to come out. Whatever's in here is going to come out this way. I think it would serve us all well this week to spend some time in quiet contemplation on how we really talk to others. There's an old saying that all of us have heard that is an out-and-out lie. Sticks and stones can break our bones, but words can never harm us. That is a lie. Words can precisely break our hearts. They can cause deep hurt and pain. They can cause even death. How many people have we maimed or killed with our own words? Our words. What about our children? Too many children are dying slow deaths because of parents' lethal verbiage. Are our tongues more quick to criticize than to praise? Do our words build up or tear down? There's an expression called loose lips sink ships. Any of you ever heard that expression, loose lips sink ships? All right, well, it's a wartime expression. It meant that you never knew who you were talking to in the military. And the slip of the tongue could give some kind of secret information that could sink a ship. Hundreds of lives could die, sacrificed. We need to stop and ask ourselves, how many people have been wounded or killed by our careless words? How many of you remember Richard and Karen Carpenter, the singing duo? You remember them? I love to hear the Carpenters. She had one of the most beautiful voices. And she died at the age of 32 from eating disorders. Do you know what instigated her eating disorder? It was the comment, a written comment by a reporter after one of their concerts, early concerts. And he said, And I quote, this man called her Richard's chubby sister. Richard's chubby sister. And when she read those words, it did something to her. It set off her having severe eating disorders and self-doubt, and eventually caused her death. Words can kill. Now, you know I don't often talk about my grandchildren, so I promise I won't every Sunday. But I have to tell you what happened this summer. This summer, my daughter called and asked us if we would follow them, she, her husband, and their 3 daughters, to St. Simon's Island. Well, it normally takes my wife and me about 5.5 hours. It only took us 9.5 to get there, following them, because they had to make so many stops along the way, you know, with small kids. And the children came to our house, and we took a break at our house, and then they got in the car and they fell asleep, and we got to Macon. And they woke up, so of course we had to have a stop. And so we stopped at the Chick-fil-A there in Macon, Georgia. And the kids ran on the playground. No other children were on the playground at that time, and they just loved going through all that stuff, you know. And I was standing there watching them while the rest of the family was getting food and stuff. And after a while, these other 2 children came in, little boy and little girl, looked to be about 5 or 6 years of age. And they started going up the playground this way when my granddaughters came down the slide this way. So my granddaughters did not know there were other children in the playground with them. So when they came sliding down, I said, George and Elizabeth, there are 2 other children in the playground now, so I just wanted you to know you're not by yourselves. And before I could say another word, and this is a sermon for another day, I wish I had time to preach on evangelism. Do you know what my little Georgia did? Oh, a child after my heart. She grabbed Elizabeth's hand and she said, come on, Elizabeth, let's go meet them. Now that's how you're supposed to do it. You see someone new in the church, let's go meet them. See someone out there, let's go meet them. Let's go meet them. And so they ran up the steps and they ran over to him, and I was still standing there listening. And Georgia runs over to these two kids and she says, hey, would you like to be my friend? And I thought, isn't that the sweetest thing in the whole world? That's just the sweetest thing. And my heart was just so big. And the little boy took a look at my gorgeous granddaughter, and he said very quickly, yes. And the little girl looked at Georgia and said, no. I'm allergic to strangers. Whoo, I was mad. That didn't sit right with me at all. And I watched little Georgia's face, and it just, all of a sudden, she had to contemplate that. She had to process it. She had never had such a thing said to her. And she jumped up, and she turned around and came down the stairs, and she came down, and she said, Dad, I just asked them if they would like to be my friend. And the boy said yes, but the girl said she's allergic to me. Oh, that broke my heart. It broke my heart. And I said, Georgia, I had to hold my tongue. I said, Georgia, she's not allergic to you. She's just been taught not to play with strangers. I don't know where she learned that expression, but someone taught her to be allergic to strangers. And those words damaged my little granddaughter. I said, you just go back up and play. I said, I whispered in her ear, I said, you just go have fun. Pretty soon she'll probably come play. And she did. Broke my heart. How do we teach civility? How do we do this? A study done by Harvard psychologist Richard Wiesborg. Now listen to this. He found that 80% of youth say their parents are more concerned about their children's achievements than they are about whether or not they care for other people. Let that sink in a minute. Do we care more about our children's achievements than teaching them how to talk and to be kind to others? He went on to say that We must be intentional as parents, and he was right, and also for the church, about teaching our children how to care and talk to others. It's difficult to hold our tongues. If we're honest, and all of us be honest, we suffer with this thing about controlling the tongue. It amazes me what people say. I can be in places that I've never been before and be with strangers who immediately come up to me and start talking about the president and how they hate the president, or how they hate the governor, or how they hate the pope, or how they hate their pastor, or how they hate a teacher, or how they hate a coach, and I don't even know them. And they don't know what I believe in my politics and where I come from, and I think it's grossly insensitive. It is grossly insensitive just to start talking about thinking everybody's supposed to believe the way we believe. We better be careful how we talk. There's so much damage. I've had people say, well, what you see is what you get with me. I just say whatever I want to say. And, that's just who I am. And I want to say, I don't buy it. I don't buy that at all. That's the most insensitive remark, to say you just get I'm just going to say whatever I want to say. That's just who I am. I want to say, then change who you are. And we can change. We can change. With God's help, we can change. I read the other day something I thought was pretty good. This is going to sound silly. We all know it. But I thought it was very profound. Think before you speak. Think before you speak. Is that not profound? But this person went a step further to take T-H-I-N-K to remind us. Is it true? Before you speak, is what you're saying true? Is it helpful to the people you're talking about? Is it inspiring? T-H-I-N. Do the people you're talking to need to hear what you're going to say? Do they really need to hear it? And the K, is it kind? T-H-I-N-K. Think before you speak. Think before you speak. Calvin Coolidge once said, I've never been hurt by anything I did not say. The proverb says it this way: he who holds his tongue is wise. A woman who was married, a mother of 6 children, was told that she lost her voice, having severe throat trouble, that she could not talk for 6 months. Imagine a mother with 6 children not being able to talk for 6 months. Had to have total rest of her vocal cords. After 6 months, her voice did come back, and when asked what it was like to communicate only in writing, the only thing she could communicate with was with a pen and paper. Someone asked her, how was that? And this mother said, you'd be surprised how many notes I crumpled up and threw into the trash before I gave them to anyone. She said, seeing my words before anyone heard them had an effect that I will never forget. I want to challenge us this morning to use encouraging words, what I call life words. Build others up. When's the last time you young people gave life words to your parents? Or your parents gave life words to you? When's the last time you gave your spouse life words? Encouraging them, loving words. Your siblings. When's the last time you've given life words to your sister or brother? Life words. When's the last time your workmates you've given life words, or your schoolmates, or your neighbors? What we say makes all the difference. And I close with this true story. There's a man who was born with a bright red birthmark that covered half of his face. And one day, a fellow got the courage to ask him what happened. And this man answered this fellow by telling him what his father told him about the birthmark. He said, son, that birthmark is where an angel kissed your face. And he said, you have that birthmark so I can always pick you out of the crowd. And the man said to this fellow, you know, I almost feel sorry for those who don't have a birthmark. Well, you see, the Father spoke life words to his Son, and the Son is still living off of those words. Will our words be life words that will live for years to come? You do know that God is still speaking, even though the Bible went to press. God is still speaking. And God's words are always about grace and hope and peace and joy and salvation. So why should ours be any different? In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen.